Hey friends, welcome back to my sewing room. My name is Becca, and in today's video, we're going to talk about the original Sewing and Quilting Expo. This is a roaming quilt show that settles in various areas throughout the country, and in the fall of every year, they stop in my area in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And I have been going to the expo every year since 2020, and I thoroughly enjoy my time there. In today's video, I want to talk to you about the class situation, the shopping situation, and most importantly, I want to share with you some of the quilts that I saw at the expo. Spoiler alert, those quilts will be shared at the end of the video, and it is quite a bit of footage, so you'll want to stick around to see all of the different pieces of work that were on display. I know I didn't capture every single quilt that was there, but I did get a good many of them. So if we take the quilts out of the expo, what's left? You got classes and you got shopping. Let's talk about the shopping situation first. There was a lot of stuff to be purchased, a lot of vendor booths to visit, and a whole lot of customers doing a whole lot of shopping. This is the first year at the expo where I actually avoided some booths because they were a little too crowded and I couldn't get in there to do my thing. That's a great thing for the quilting industry, but maybe a bad thing for Becca's stash, but a great thing for Becca's wallet. Nevertheless, I did manage to buy a few things. I stopped at 3 different booths and bought a few things. The first booth that I stopped at is for Love So Modern. You guys may remember Erin from Love So Modern. She came out during a Friday Night Live and did a trunk show for a bunch of quilts that she has designed and written patterns for. And all of those quilts are coming out in a book that will start shipping in November of this year. By the way, if you have not signed up to buy that book, it's on pre-order now. I will put a link to it in the show notes down below so you can grab your own copy before they start shipping. She had some of her patterns on display for purchase, a little enamel pin that had a cassette tape to honor her pattern Radical cassettes, and then some stickers. So I bought the pin, a pattern, and a couple of stickers just to show my support for Erin. Erin's booth was next to another booth that also sold patterns, and it caught my eye as soon as I walked in. The booth was for a company called Easy Piecing, and they have a product called Easy Patterns. Essentially, what they've done is they've taken patterns that are foundation paper piecing patterns, and they've printed them on a lightweight, like ultra lightweight sew-in interfacing. And the idea here is that since it's printed on this interfacing that is completely able to go through the washing machine, you don't have to remove it when you're done sewing. The interfacing holds up a little bit more than the paper would for your piecing, and there's no ripping the paper out of the back of it. I knew exactly what this was as soon as I saw it because David Gilliam, I believe that's his name, from Vector Quilts does the same thing. However, his patterns are printed on a thicker interfacing, which adds a little bit more bulk to your blocks. Not so much that it's impossible to work with, but definitely more significant than what Easy Piecing has for their system. I have been loving my time in the FPP world lately, so of course I had to buy some of those patterns. I picked up a couple patterns for a couple different wall quilts, but then I picked up 2 patterns that are going to allow me to do a little bit of tiny piecing. One of them is for a pineapple quilt, and the other one is for a log cabin quilt, and I have actually already started the log cabin quilt. Both of these patterns feature blocks that will finish at 2 inches. On the log cabin, that means that center little square in the middle of your log cabin block finishes at just ½ an inch. It is super tiny, super adorable, and I am loving my time working on those blocks. It's a little finicky, so I'm definitely appreciative that I've got that foundation to help keep my piecing spot on. And for those of you that are curious, that log cabin quilt, when it's all done, is only going to measure 6 inches wide by 8 inches long. I know some of you out there are probably questioning my sanity for working with pieces this small, but I just like tiny things. The third vendor that I stopped at was Thimbles for You, and I forgot to take video or pictures of the booth. So what I've done is grabbed a little bit of footage of what her website looks like so you can get an idea of some of the things that she sells. For those of you that might not know, I collect thimbles. Most of my thimbles are decorative in nature and they're on display in my sewing room, but I did take a class on hand quilting, which I'll talk about in just a few more minutes, and decided between my embroidery projects, cross stitch, and a newfound love for hand quilting, I needed a thimble of my own. So this is a thimble that I bought at the expo. The second thing I want to talk to you about is the class situation. The expo offers a ton of classes every day that they're there, and a lot of them are geared toward garment making, but they do have some lectures and quilting classes as well. I took the day off on Friday and I took a Notion lecture with a lady who has a quilt shop in Ohio. And I took a curved piecing class with Erin from Love So Modern. Now, why did I take that curved piecing class? Well, honestly, because Erin challenged me to. When she came out to do her trunk show on my live, she showcased all these beautiful quilts that had curved piecing in them, and she promised she would teach me how to do it and said it was not as difficult as I thought it was. So when I saw that she was teaching the class, they had bandwidth or vacancy in the classroom. Of course, I wanted to support her, and I joined her for a couple hours of sewing. And you guys, her method was a whole lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I left that class making 8 drunkard's path blocks that I was able to put into 2 quilt blocks. I feel like I have mastered the technique of making a drunkard's path block and would look forward to making a quilt made of just those drunkard's paths. In fact, my friend Tiffany over at Tiffany's Quilting Life yesterday in her vlog video showcased a drunkard's path quilt that she made. And now I've got my little brain wondering, could I do that same quilt with some different fabrics? The notions class, by the way, was super fun. It was just a lecture about different notions that you can use in your room. I don't think I actually came across any notion that I've not already seen, so not a lot to share there. But the lady that did the lecture was hilarious and extremely knowledgeable, and I would recommend it. I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but I will put it in the show notes down below in case you see her roaming with the expo in the future. The third class that I took was actually focused around handwork. When I went to QuiltCon in February 2023, I picked up some hand embroidery kits because I wanted to be able to do some hand sewing or quilting type work when I'm not in my sewing room. And while I do still enjoy doing some of that hand embroidery, I've not been doing it as much lately, and I want to continue to find that hand craft that speaks to me so that I have something to work on when I'm not in my sewing space. Erin taught a big stitch quilting class on Saturday, and so I signed up for that because I've seen her big stitch quilting, I've seen others do it, and it looks like a lot of fun. She was so kind. She made a quilt block for everybody and then basically quilted it. So it had batting and backing, and it was just stitch in the ditch, so you couldn't see any of the stitches, but it held all 3 layers together, and she passed those out during class. And everybody got their own little thing of wonderful pearl cotton, size 8, a needle, of course, and we just sat in the classroom and big stitched our blocks. She taught us how to get started, how to finish, and then some of the rules and techniques that she uses. And honestly, the demonstration took like 10 minutes. And once that was done, we had the rest of the class time, which was about 2 hours, to sit in the room and work on our hand quilting. By the time I left that class, I did have some nice stitching done on my friendship block, little mini quilt, I guess. And I was in love with the whole idea of big stitch quilting. I'm going on a trip next week and I'm planning to take a couple of quilt blocks that I will sandwich together with some nice thick thread and some needles and see if maybe I can work on some hand quilting while I'm away from home. Overall, the expo was a lot of fun, and I gotta tell you, if you have been in recent years, this year it was definitely busier than it has been in past years. So make sure to prepare for that. I feel like Friday was a little bit busier than Saturday, but all in all, it was a great time and I would highly recommend. So now let's get to what you all have been waiting for, the quilts. I'm going to roll some footage that I've made for you that showcase all of the quilts that spoke to me at the expo. Let me show you an exhibit that they had at the Fredericksburg Expo that I thought was just awesome. It was called Inspired by the Nation's Capital, and these were quilts that were personally curated by a lady by the name of Donna Marcinkowski de Soto. To help celebrate our nation's capital, fiber artists from across the country have portrayed key places and events in the Washington, D.C. area. This collection of over 100 original 24-inch by 24-inch quilts showcases historic buildings, monuments, landmarks, museums, and recreation areas. The collection is a fabric travelogue enabling viewers the opportunity to see a wide variety of sites from the very familiar to the lesser known that feature the heart of the city, from the most serious locations to the more playful. They did have a sign up that had some information about the exhibit, and there was a link on the sign that you could use to read an article that gave you some more details about the exhibit. I'll put that in the show notes down below. But for now, let's just enjoy some music and take in all of these very beautiful quilts. These next quilts are part of the Quilt 2022 collection. The original Sewing and Quilt Expo embarked on their first quilt contest in 2022. It was a spectacular exhibit showcasing 50 amazing quilts juried from talented quilt makers across the country. These remarkable works of art represented a wide range of artistic skill and ability. Thousands in cash prizes and ribbons were awarded by Sherry Macy, NACQJ certified judge at the Expo in Lebanon, Tennessee in October 2022. You can enjoy this sampling of the inspiring and beautiful quilts. And if you want to see all of the details about the contest, there will be a link in the show notes down below. Let's just sit back and watch. This next exhibit is definitely a little political, but it was really cool. It was called the Voting Line, and it was made up of a bunch of different quilts that all were made to look like people. And I believe from what I saw from all of the different signs next to the quilted people, these were all historical figures that helped bring about democracy. There was a sign at the start of the exhibit that had a story that went along with this. And it read, April 2022, COVID-19 is still upon us. The people standing in line have been there since 2020. If they were created this year, they would all be wearing face masks and standing at least 6 feet apart. Some of them might even be reevaluating their decisions on who they were going to vote for. These people could make up a historic image of what voting used to be like before the virus. If most of them survive until 2024, they may even still be wearing masks, or the virus may be gone. The main thing here is that many people are willing to get out and vote. The article went on to explain that the author, who lives in Minnesota, finds it's very easy to register to vote. Even the homeless can vote in Minnesota. This is Daytime Dreaming by Karen Spencer from Portland, Oregon. She says that this highlights the organic nature of her hand-dyed fabrics with a flowing, peaceful design suggestive of our natural world. Can you guess what this quilt is supposed to represent? It's a nest, and it was made by Pat Bishop out of Wisconsin. She said that this piece was based on one of the photos that she took in the middle of winter. She never would have seen the nest otherwise, as it would have been well hidden by the bush that it was in. The amount of detail in this quilt was just absolutely stunning. This was called Nurture by Sarah Sharp out of Austin, Texas. She said the quilt was based on a photo she took of her husband showing their grandson how to feed an orphaned calf. She says that their Central Texas ranch has provided a refuge from their city lives. They have enjoyed many opportunities to share their appreciation of the animals and nature, and those experiences have helped them form closer relationships with their children and grandchildren. This quilt is called Readers Are Leaders by Clara Nardi out of Connecticut, and it was entered into an exhibit called Haven. Clara writes that Haven is leaving your troubles behind and getting caught up in a good book which takes you miles away from everything you know. The young boy in this piece is in his safe haven. His relaxed posture with his leg over the chair speaks to his state of mind and how safe he feels in that moment of time. This is called Home Valley by Alison James out of Holmfirth in West Yorkshire in the United Kingdom. She said, home is where the heart is, and this landscape, the Home Valley in Yorkshire, United Kingdom, has captured our hearts. She moved there in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic, and they have found great solace in the beauty of the Home Valley. This is quilt drawing number 26 by Daphne Taylor out of Montville, Maine. It is hand embroidered and hand quilted and uses silk. She says, my havens have always offered me a place to experience calm, beauty, and light. They let me walk deeper into unknowns, inspiring me to look anew. Quilt drawing number 26 honors this notion of haven, drawing the viewer into a few moments of a quiet and contemplative experience. This is called Heart of It by Deborah Goley out of Arizona. She says the agave plant litters the southwest landscape. At a closer view, the plant reveals the center of a complex succulent. The spiraling of the plant growth from the center to the outer ring suggests the Fibonacci theory is at play. I am intrigued by how growth and life begin with this central haven. It is the heart of the matter. I chose yellow to depict the heart color, symbolizing friendship, and warmth as a core to the haven of the soul. This is called Dance Room, submitted by Dana over in Poland. She says in the wintertime, with little sunshine and very short days, she tends to fall into a sad and depressed state. Hey, I can relate to that. However, I recently discovered a dance hall in a nearby fitness center available to people who don't like the traditional exercise. I go there with a friend, and it helps restore our joy and optimism, and this is now my favorite place. And I will say I loved looking at this quilt because it tends to remind me of the joy I feel when I wrap up a project. Cindy made this quilt, which is called Put Your Feet Up and Take It Easy, and she lives over in Israel. She says a loving home is the epitome of a haven. This quilt invokes an atmosphere of safety and togetherness in the boom of our home, a haven for my family. The image conjured up here is a family gathering. Everyone is relaxing together in the warmth of the living room with their feet up, enjoying each other's company. Some of the paper was covered up by this one, so I couldn't read the entire write-up. But I think it's called Something Desert Garden, and I believe it's made by a lady by the name of Shannon Conley out of Oklahoma. She says that she is drawn to hot, burnt colors of the flowers that flourished in the high deserts of New Mexico where she grew up. The quilt drew inspiration from red hot pokers and the Indian paintbrush growing in the crispy yellow-green grass. I love this quilt because it's not just a quilt, it looks more like a fabric sculpture. Bobby Baugh made this quilt, which is called Writing in the Next Word. She lives in Florida, and she says that creating a safe harbor is a gift that women are able to give one another. She is deeply grateful for the counsel of strong women who have provided a landing place for her when her journey required it. Shelter from the storm need not be a place. It can be a person. Now, the group of women in my writing group provide me weekly refuge. I am learning again the strength that can be found when women depend on one another. Linda Steele from Australia made this quilt called Melbourne Malaise. She says in 2020, the only safe place to be was home, with just 1 hour of outdoor exercise allowed per day. Despite the scenery, birds, and flowers, all our thoughts were on the number of cases and news reports. I could not believe the amount of detail in this quilt, and it definitely triggered some memories of dealing with the pandemic. Jan made this quilt called Hillside Gems, and she's from California. She said on a road trip a few years ago, this remnant of a building found among the back roads in Utah captured her attention. She could envision it as a safe haven for animals on a cold winter night, or a place for a weary traveler from a bygone era to rest his head after roaming the nearby hills. It may have been used to simply store hay or animals. I will never know, but it is fun to speculate. This is called Once Loved, and it was created by Allison King out of Alberta, Canada. It uses photographic elements on canvas with new and repurposed fabric. She printed, cut, layered, manipulated, and even free motion stitched to get this end result. I kind of got Pitfall vibes from this one. This is called A Boy and His Imagination from Deb Cashat out of California. She says sometimes a haven is your own backyard. I photographed my nephew swinging from a tree in his sun-dappled suburban yard. To me, it seemed like a very safe place. Then again, who knows what dangers lurked in his imagination? This is Whisper in the Wind, created by Catherine Allen out of Wisconsin. She said she had these misfit scraps in her hands, and they whispered to me, "We want to go to the ball." So I created a freehand silhouette sweetheart with an evening gown made from scraps. The sweetheart is appliqued to the pieced background, and I finished the piece with hand quilting. Dana Cassie from Columbus, Wisconsin created Reminiscent Ruby. She said years of watching Sewing with Nancy and seeing how Nancy Ziman made things easier has always inspired her. When she saw her blue and white floating squares hanging in a quilt show, she said to herself, "I'm going to make that quilt." Even though I had never made one before, I chose ruby red instead of cobalt blue to honor 40 years of Sewing with Nancy. This is Peering Out of the Darkness by Shannon Conley from Oklahoma. She says this wintry night scene is an exploration of ambiguity and self-reflection. Viewers can see their own emotions in the woman standing alone in the darkness, gazing into the peering lightness of the world outside. Deborah Boschert from Texas created this piece called Multitudes, and she writes, "People are complex. We are full of rough edges and smooth curves. dark and light, fullness and depletion, times of growth and moments of dormancy, predictable patterns and messy details. This is easily one of my favorites out of the quilt show. This is called Gaze, and it was submitted by Margaret from St. George, Utah. Margaret says that Gaze is a photograph of her daughter Jana that she took with her cell phone. A selfie is a new phenomenon used widely enough to be added to the Oxford English Dictionary and to be chosen as the word of the year in 2013. My daughter has fully engaged with this art form. She is both photogenic and dramatic. The selfie has provided her generation with a public mirror through the lens of social media into which millions of people can gaze. Oh my goodness, wasn't that just amazing? There were some beautiful quilts on display, and I absolutely felt extremely inspired by every piece of work that was hung. Thank you, friends, so much for tuning in to this week's video. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye!